I really have to say, my daughter, it's really funny, my daughter, when she was in high school, I was a prof here, she's like, I don't want to hear about I'm a good student, I know how to study, you don't need your methods, Mom. And then she hit grade 11 and she had a really rough time with a particular course. And she was devastated because she was a note rewriter. And I was trying to tell her, don't do it this way. So it wasn't until then that she rewrote her notes, or she revised her study method. And then she became a TA here at Trent in the biology department as a graduate student. She's like, Mom, they're note rewriters. And I thought that was rather funny. But that was probably the epiphany for me. Because in high school I was trained to rewrite your notes. You need good study notes. They should be beautiful. That doesn't actually matter. Having beautiful notes means nothing to what is actually up here. What you need to assess is what you have in your memory. And the best way to do that is what can you generate on your own? I do also have suggestions in the SPEW method pamphlet about making sure in lecture that you're attending. If a professor, we tend to focus on things that we think are important, and 10 to 1, that's going to show up on the exam. So, and we often will say stupid stuff like, gee, if I was going to write, I would really, expect to see this on the exam. I actually do that a lot. I said, if I was the professor, I would put this on the exam. I know a lot of my colleagues do the same.
I do. I say, and this would be a red star moment.
Yeah.
Which means put a red star right on your notes.
There's one particular...
I had a midterm saying like 75% of the material on the test was from lecture.
Exactly. We are not, most of us as professors are not, not particularly into making work. If we bring it up in lecture, it's because we've chosen it out of all the things we could have possibly mentioned. Lectures are the prof's way of telling you, I think this is important. It's, this is the stuff you should really focus on. Because we expect you to sort of read, intro psych is, the chapter is quite broad, but then in lecture, I will focus on certain things. Some professors will give you topics and a list of topics if they do pay close attention. If they give you a red star moment or highlight it, you should be in lecture. That should be circled and say, oh, okay. Oddly enough, by being in lecture and even hearing that, often that will make you remember. I ask a lot of questions about some of the key theories. And part of it is I emphasize, that's why my students still remember Watson. That's so, and so I will, make sure that I'm trying to ensure that the students have memory anchors. I'll give examples. And so profs generally want students to learn. It's kind of our job. So you want to make sure.
Trick you.
Yeah. Some might want to challenge you. Absolutely. We want to challenge you, but we want you to grow. And I think that's the key. So I don't want to trick students into performing poorly, but I do want I want them to feel challenged. Like to really discriminate to people who, that a 90 means something. So what year were you in? First. So this is and high schools often don't help you with how to study. And it's because, I think it's just a different philosophy. The testing style is different. Here it's kind of like you're on your own. Yeah. You have to figure out what study method's going to work for you. And what year were you in?
Third.
So what do you think resonated for you? What is?
I think I definitely need to change my study habits, like how I study. So the SPEW method might help me a little bit.
SPEW method, always consider the testing method. So if you're being asked to remember a lot of facts and content, the SPEW method is perfect. Because it's really about what do you remember from the course? What do you have in your memory? It's great for content. As you move up the ladder, you're going to experience other things. So if you have a test where you have to do calculations, what should you be practicing in your study method?
Doing those calculations.
with only the materials you have access to on the exam. That's the one of the major mistakes students make. They study with all their props and the textbook, and so whenever they run into problems, they're constantly referring to all these materials you will not be able to access legally on the exam. At some point, you need to be able to assess, can I answer this question with only the material I have on the exam? And the other thing I would suggest is don't underestimate the need to study under time pressure. Many of us, when we're studying in a very leisurely and intense way. What you want to always build in is the impact of being anxious and under time pressure, and what that's going to do to you. So when I spew, even when I spew, I do it under time pressure. I say, okay, Brenda, here are 5 topics. You've got 10 minutes. Spew everything you can remember. Point form, not pretty. Don't care about pretty. Just get it out. See what you can do. So always practice for time pressure. What time is it? Let's see how we're doing for time here, because I don't want to bore you guys. Any other questions you want to ask me as a prof? Just been around the block a little bit.
Do you have any other tips for conquering test anxiety?
I can tell you about the research, because one of my very good friends does research on test anxiety. And I was very interested, because I used to freeze up with the exams. And it was very, very unsatisfying. Do you know what the #1 treatment for test anxiety is? Proper preparation. Studying.
See, I find even when I've studied a lot though that I'm still very anxious.
Yeah, so one of the things I would do is when you're studying for you want to acknowledge the role of anxiety. The way in which I dealt with my anxiety, and some of my friends have too, is going for the easy questions first. Don't sweat. Because what happens when you start to get anxious is that your anxiety starts to block your memory. Because anxiety takes resources, mental resources. The more anxious you become, so you're looking at question 1, you're starting to freak out because you don't know it. And that starts an anxiety reaction which takes over part of your memory and leaves less for you to think. So one of the things to do, that's why I say don't even think about question 1 if you don't know it, move to 2. If you don't know 2, move to 3. Go for the easy ones. The other thing that I would recommend is the deep breaths to stop that autonomic response. The spew method made me feel better because, especially at the end of the studying period when I could spew on all these topics, it was kind of like, yes, look at all this stuff I can remember from this course. The study method does help, but also if you're experiencing extreme anxiety,